Hello and welcome to the video solutions to my 2025 Edexcel Practice Paper 3F. You can download a copy of this paper at my website firstclassmaths.com, and there's also a link in this video's description. I would like to thank Casio Education for sponsoring these video solutions. In this first question, we need to write 21% as a fraction. To write any percentage as a fraction, you just write it over 100. So we'll take the 21%, 21, and write it over 100. In the second question, we need to write down the value of the number 4 in 14375. So if we write out this number and look at the number 4, we can see it's in the thousands place. So it must represent 4,000. In question 3, we need to round this number to 3 decimal places. The number that's in the third decimal place is this 1 here. So we will draw a line after this 1 and then check the next digit, which is this 5. If this number is 5 or more, we would need to round up. And it is 5 or more, so we'll round the 1 up to a 2. So the final answer rounded will be 3.142. To do both parts of this question, you can just type them into your calculator. If you do 1.3 cubed, you end up with 2.197. And if you do the square root of 88.36, you end up with 9.4. In this question, we need to put the numbers in order of size. I like to do this by writing them vertically like this. I then fill in any of the gaps with zeros, and now it's easier to compare the numbers. The smallest one would be 0.04, then we have 0.4, then 0.41, and 0.415. In the first part of this question, we need to write down a number from the list that is a factor of 30. The factors of 30 are the numbers that divide into 30 without a remainder. We usually write them down in pairs. So to get 30, we could do 1 multiplied by 30, or 2 multiplied by 15, or 3 multiplied by 10, or 5 multiplied by 6. So we're looking for one of these numbers in the list. The only one that is in the list is the number 10. In the second part of the question, we're looking for a prime number. Prime numbers are numbers that have exactly 2 factors, so the list of prime numbers looks like this. The only one of these numbers from the list is the number 19, so that's the answer. And in the final part, we're looking for a square number. A square number is the result of multiplying a number by itself, so if we start with 1 times 1, that's 1, and that isn't in the list. 2 times 2 is 4, that's also not in the list, but 3 times 3 is 9, and that is in the list, so we would write down 9. In this question, we've got a pictogram, and we're told that Sean spends 120 minutes revising for maths. If we look at the pictogram for maths, we can see it has 2 circles. So if we divide 120 by 2, we find that each of the circles must represent 60 minutes. This allows us to complete the key for the pictogram. One circle represents 60 minutes. Now we need to fill in the parts for science and English. We're told that Sean spends 75 minutes revising for English. So if we put one circle, that would be 60 minutes, which is not too far away from 75. To work out how much is left, we can subtract 60 from 75, which is 15. So we just need to draw 15 more minutes. If one circle is 60 minutes, then half a circle would be 30 minutes, and that's too much. But half of this, which is 1/4 of a circle, would be 15 minutes, since half of 30 is 15. So we've now got 60 minutes and 15 minutes, that makes 75. So English is done. We don't have the amount of time that Sean spent revising for science, so we need to work that out. We are told that she spends 405 minutes revising for all 3 of the subjects though. So if we add up the time for maths and English, 120 and 75, we get 195. We could then subtract this from the total, so 405 subtract 195, and that leaves us with 210. So science needs to be 210 minutes. One circle will be 60 minutes, 2 circles will be another 60, so that's 120, 3 circles is another 60, so that's 180, and we're nearly there, we need 30 more, which is half a circle, and that'll put us on 210. So that's your completed pictogram. In this question, we have a spinner that has 6 equal-sized sections. We're going to spin the spinner, and we need to find the probability that the number is less than 5. Looking at the spinner, we can see that 4 of the numbers are less than 5. So the probability will be 4 out of the total number of numbers, which is 6. So we're looking for the probability 4 out of 6, and we need to mark it on this probability scale. Since this scale has been split into 6 equal sections, each of them must represent 1/6. So we've got 1 out of 6, 2 out of 6, 3 out of 6, 4 out of 6, and 5 out of 6. So we're looking for 4 out of 6, so we mark a cross on the scale here. In the first part of this question, we need to write down the coordinates of point A. Let's do the x coordinate first, so if we go from A down to the x-axis, we can see its coordinate is 1. Then for the y coordinate, we go across to the y-axis, and the y coordinate is 3. In the second part of the question, we need to write down the coordinates of the midpoint of line AB. To do this, I'm going to draw a line connecting A and B together. This makes it easier to see where the midpoint is, which is right here. The coordinates of this point are 3, since it's on the x-axis, and 0, since we don't go up or down at all. For the final part of the question, we need to draw a line with the equation y equals -4. The line y equals -4 will cross the y-axis at -4, which is here. So this is a horizontal line going through that point, so something like this. In this question, we're told that 400 grams of carrots cost 60 pence. Peter has £10 and wants to buy 7 kilograms of carrots. Does Peter have enough money? The first thing we want to do in this question is convert the 7 kilograms into grams. There are 1,000 grams in a kilogram, so 7 kilograms will be 7,000 grams. So this question's saying that 400 grams cost 60 pence, and we want to know the cost of 7,000 grams. What we want to do is work out how many times we need 400 grams to get to 7,000 grams, so what would we multiply it by? We can work this out by doing 7,000 divided by 400, which is 17.5. So 400 times 17.5 will get us enough grams of carrots, so we just need to multiply the price by 17.5 as well. If you do 60 pence multiplied by 7.5, you get £10.50. In the question, we're told that Peter had £10, and it's going to cost £10.50, so he doesn't have enough. So we need to write down a sentence to explain that. Peter does not have enough money. In this question, we're asked to work out the perimeter of the rectangle. The perimeter of a shape is the sum of its side lengths. We can see 2 of the side lengths on this rectangle, we just need the other 2. The one on the top is going to be the same length as the one on the bottom, so also 7.5. And the one on the right will be the same as the one on the left, so 3.5. All we do now is just add up all of these numbers, so 3.5 plus 7.5 plus 3.5 plus 7.5. You can do this on your calculator and you'll get 22, which is the answer to the question. For the first part of this question, we need to factorise. This means we need to put it into brackets. If we look at 5k and -50, both of those have a factor of 5, so we can factorise out 5. Then we need to work out what would go inside the brackets. What would we multiply 5 by to get to 5k? Well, that's just k, since 5 multiplied by k is 5k. But what would we multiply 5 by to get to -50? That's -10. It's now been factorised, it's 5 brackets k minus 10. In the second part of the question, we need to solve this inequality. So if we write out the inequality, what we want to do is subtract 2.1 from both sides. If we do that on the left-hand side, the 2.1 will cancel, so we just have x. And on the right-hand side, 3.9 subtract 2.1 is 1.8. So this is the answer, x is less than 1.8. In part C of this question, we need to rearrange this formula to make h the subject. So if we take the formula, what we want to do is get h on its own. At the moment we can see that h is divided by 5, so we will multiply both sides by 5. If you multiply the left side by 5, the divide 5 will cancel, so you just have h. On the right side we need to multiply c by 5, which is 5c. So h is equal to 5c, and that's the answer to the question. In the final part of this question, we've been told that a is 9 and b is -5. We need to work out the value of 3a plus b squared. To do this, we're going to write out 3a plus b squared, but substitute in those values of 9 and -5. So when we have 3a, that's 3 lots of 9. And when we have add b squared, that's add -5 squared. Now, as long as you put that -5 in brackets, you can just type this straight into your calculator, and it will give you the correct answer, 52. In this question, we need to reflect a shape in a mirror line. I'm going to do this by marking on each of the key points on the shape. We'll count how many squares they are away from the mirror line and then do this past the mirror line. So if we look at these 2 points here, they're 1 square away from the mirror line. So we'll go 1 square past the mirror line when we reflect them. These 3 points here are 3 squares away, so we'll go 3 squares past the mirror line. Now that we've worked out where all of the points reflect to, we can connect them together to make the shape. It will look something like this. In this question, we need to rotate the shape 180 degrees about point P. 180 degrees is 1/2 of a turn. For this question, I would recommend using tracing paper. In your exam, you may need to put your hand up and ask for some tracing paper. Once you've got the tracing paper over the shape and the point you're turning it around, draw on the shape. Place your pencil onto the point P, then turn it the required amount, so this one is 1/2 a turn, which will actually be the same as just turning it upside down. And then this is where the shape needs to go, so you can lift off your tracing paper and draw the shape in this location. In the final part of this question, we need to do an enlargement of shape C with scale factor 2. Scale factor 2 means it needs to be twice as big. Let's write down the lengths of the sides of shape C. On the bottom here it's 3 squares, the height on the right hand side is 2, then going along the top we have 1 and 1, then this one's 2 and this one's 1. So we need to draw the shape again, but we need to double all of these numbers. So instead of 3 along the bottom, it's double 3, which is 6. Instead of 2 up on the right hand side here, it's double 2, which is 4. Then instead of going across 1, we go across 2. Then instead of down 1, we go down 2. And instead of 2 across, we go 4 across. And the last one, you can see, instead of 1 is 2. So this shape has now been drawn with scale factor 2. For this question, it doesn't matter where you draw it on the grid as long as it's this size. In this question, we have a conversion graph and we've been asked to convert 20 miles into kilometers. So let's go to the mile scale at the bottom and find 20 miles, go up to the conversion line, and then go across to read off the value in kilometers. Now this one you need to be careful with. Some people might write down 31, but there's not 10 squares between 30 and 40, there's only 5. This means that each of the squares will represent 2 rather than 1. So it will go 30, 32, 34, 36, 38, 40. So this one is actually at 32, and that's the answer to the question. In the second part of the question, we need to convert 720 kilometers into yards. Now, it doesn't have yards on the conversion graph, it does have kilometers though, but we are told that 1 mile is the same as 1,760 yards. So what we can do is convert the kilometers to miles using the graph, and then use this conversion to convert the miles to yards. So let's think about how we can convert 720 kilometers into miles. The first thing you might notice is that this graph does not go up to 720. In fact, it goes nowhere near that. So we need to be smart. What we could do instead of 720 is do 72. If we go from 72 kilometers across the conversion graph and down, we find this is the same as 45 miles. If we now multiply both sides of this by 10, we'll end up with 720 kilometers, which is what we wanted, equals 450 miles. So we've now converted the kilometers into miles, but we need to convert this into yards. Each one of those miles is the same as 1,760 yards. So we can take the 450 miles and multiply it by 1,760, which will give you 792,000. And that's the answer to the question. In this question, we have 2 parallelograms which are similar, and in the first part, we need to work out the length of EF. To do this, we need to work out the scale factor of enlargement between the 2 similar shapes. We can do that by looking at the lengths of 20 and 30 here. We need to work out how we get from 20 to 30 by multiplying. We can do this by dividing 30 by 20, which is 1.5. This means we must have multiplied the 20 by 1.5 to get to 30, so the scale factor of enlargement is 1.5. We've been asked to work out EF, which is this length here. That means we must have multiplied the 12 by 1.5 as well. So if you do 12 times 1.5 on your calculator, you'll find EF is 18, and that's the answer to the question. In the second part, we need to write down the size of the angle marked X, which is this one here. Since this shape has been enlarged, that angle will actually just be the same as this one. The angle doesn't change size when you do an enlargement, so the answer is just 70. In the final part of the question, we need to work out the size of the angle marked Y. Since this shape is a parallelogram, the side BC is parallel to AD. This means these angles here are inside parallel lines, and they're actually co-interior angles, which means they add up to 180. So this 70 and this Y here must make 180. So we can find Y by subtracting the 70 from 180, which is 110, and that's the answer to the question. For this question, we need to draw the graph of y equals 5 minus 2x for x values from -2 to 3. What we do here is draw out a table, and we have x and y values, but we've been told in the question the x values need to go from -2 to 3. We just use this formula up here to work out the y values. Y will always equal 5 subtract 2 lots of the x value. Let's start with the x value of 0. All we're going to do here is substitute 0 where the x is, so instead of y equals 5 take away 2x, it's y equals 5 take away 2 lots of 0. 2 lots of 0 is just 0, so this is actually 5 take away 0, which is 5. So if x is 0, y would have been 5. Now we're going to change the 0 for 1, so y equals 5 subtract 2 lots of 1. 2 1s are 2, so this is 5 subtract 2, which is 3. So when x is 1, y is 3. Then we continue this process for x equals 2, so y equals 5 subtract 2 2s, which is 5 subtract 4, which is 1. Then for x equals 3, 5 subtract 2 lots of 3, 2 3s are 6, so 5 subtract 6, which is -1. Now I'm going to go back and substitute in -1. So it's y equals 5 subtract 2 lots of -1, which is y equals 5 subtract -2. 5 subtract -2 is the same as 5 add 2, which is 7, and you can do this on your calculator if you want to. And finally, for x equals -2, we'd have 5 subtract -4, which is 9. Some people find it a bit more difficult when the x values are negative. If you've worked out the positive x values for a graph like this, you can actually see that going this direction we're always adding on 2. Some of you may find this a bit easier for working out the final two values. All we need to do now is plot these as coordinates. So the first coordinate is x is -2 and y is 9. That point goes here. Then we have x is -1 and y is 7, that goes here. Then 0 5, 1 3, 2 1, and 3 -1. You'll see all of these form a straight line, so we get a ruler and connect these together like this. In the first part of this question, we're asked to work out the percentage of the customers that pay for standard definition. We can see the number of customers that pay for standard definition here is 56, but we need to write this as a percentage. To do this, I would first of all write it as a fraction. In order to do that, we need to know how many there were in total, which we were told in the question, it's 200. So the fraction that paid for standard definition is 56 out of 200. To convert this to a percentage, you just multiply it by 100. You can type this into your calculator and you'll get 28%. In the second part of the question, we're only looking at the customers that paid for high definition, and we need to write down a ratio of those that pay monthly to those that pay annually. We can see on the frequency tree that there are 64 that pay monthly and 80 that pay annually, so the ratio is 64 to 80. This question does say to give it in its simplest form though, so we need to simplify this. I can see that we can divide both 64 and 80 by 8. If you do 64 divided by 8 you get 8, and 80 divided by 8 you get 10. These can also then be further divided by 2. 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 10 divided by 2 is 5. So the final simplified ratio is 4 to 5. For the final part of this question, we have two options, standard and high definition, and we'll need to work out the difference between the annual costs for each of them. Let's start by looking at the standard definition. If the monthly cost is £5.99, but we're doing the annual cost, which is 12 months, we need to multiply £5.99 by 12. If you do this on your calculator, you'll get £71.88. But there is also a 25% discount, so we need to work out 25% of this and subtract it. To work out 25%, you could do 25 divided by 100, which is 0.25, and then if we multiply the price by 0.25, this will find 25% of it for us. That'll be £17.97. This means even though the price is £71.88, we're going to get £17.97 off, so we better subtract that from the price. That gives us the final price with the saving of £53.91. Now we'll do the same process for high definition. So we'll take the monthly cost, £8.95, and multiply it by 12 for the 12 months. This gives you £107.40. This time the deal is slightly different, it's 30% off. So we do 30 divided by 100, which is 0.3, and multiply the price by this instead. That gives us £32.22. This means we're getting £32.22 off, so we can subtract that from the £107.40, which will give you a final price of £75.18. We need to work out the difference between the two costs. So if we take the £75.18 and subtract from that £53.91, you'll end up with a final answer £21.27. In this question, we need to expand and simplify. We're going to start by multiplying 9 by h, which will give you 9h. Then we have 9 multiplied by 2, which is 18. And moving on to the second bracket, we have negative 5 multiplied by h, which is negative 5h. And finally, negative 5 multiplied by negative 3, which is a positive 15. Lots of students make a mistake and put negative here, but it's a negative multiplied by another negative, which will give you a positive. Now we need to do the simplifying. We'll do this by collecting like terms. So we have 9h subtract 5h, which is 4h. And then we also have 18 plus 15, which is 33. So it's 4h plus 33. In the second part of the question, we need to simplify. We'll start with the top of the fraction, 6n to the 5 multiplied by 3nm cubed. To do this, we multiply the coefficient 6 and 3, which is 18, and then we have n to the 5 multiplied by n to the 1, which is n to the 6, and then we have m cubed, and we need to divide this by 2n squared m. To divide, we will divide the coefficient, so 18 divided by 2, which is 9, then we have n to the 6 divided by n to the 2. When you divide like this, you subtract the indices, so 6 subtract 2, which is 4, so n to the power 4. And finally, we have m to the power 3 divided by m to the power 1, which is m to the power 2, or m squared. So it's 9 n to the 4 m squared. In this question, we need to write down an expression in terms of n for the nth term of the sequence. To do this, we'll take the sequence and first of all work out the difference between each of the terms, and in all of these it's add 6. This means the nth term will start with 6n. We then write the multiples of 6, or the 6 times table, above the sequence. We need to work out how to get from the multiples of 6 to our sequence. In all cases here you need to add 3, since 6 add 3 is 9, 12 add 3 is 15, 18 add 3 is 21, and 24 add 3 is 27. So the nth term will be 6n add 3. In this question we need to complete a Venn diagram. We've been given the universal set, which is the numbers from 1 to 10. The set A is the square numbers, so let's work those out. To get square numbers, you multiply numbers by themselves, so 1 times 1, which is 1, 2 times 2, which is 4, 3 times 3, which is 9. The next one would be 4 times 4, which is 16, but that's not in the universal set, so we can stop here. Set B is the odd numbers, so that's 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. We're now ready to put these into the Venn diagram. We first of all look for numbers that are in both of the sets and place those into the middle. So we've got 1 that's in both of them, so that can go in the middle, and also 9, so that goes in the middle as well. Then we're left with the number 4 to go in A, so we put that on the left-hand side, and the numbers 3, 5, and 7 in B, so they go on the right-hand side. Now that's not all of the numbers from the universal set. Let's cross out the numbers we've already put into the Venn diagram, so 1, 3, 4, 5, 7, and 9. This leaves us with 2, 6, 8, and 10, which still need to go into the Venn diagram but not inside sets A or B, so we place them here. In the second part of the question we have a number being chosen at random and we need to find the probability that it's in the set A intersection B. The intersection of A and B, which is what this symbol means, is the overlapping section in the middle of the Venn diagram, this section here. We count up how many elements are in the intersection and we can see there are 2, the 1 and the 9, so the probability of selecting one of those is going to be 2, since there's 2 numbers, out of all of the numbers, and we know there are 10 in total, so it's out of 10. If you want, you can simplify this to 1 over 5, but you don't need to for this question. In this question, we're told about a number C which has been rounded to 1 decimal place, and the result is 20.4, and then we need to write down an error interval for C. I like to do this with a number line. Let's place the number 20.4 in the middle. And since this was rounded to 1 decimal place, let's consider 1 decimal place above and below 20.4. So that would be 20.3 and 20.5. The error interval is then halfway in between each of these numbers. So halfway in between 20.3 and 20.4 is 20.35. Halfway in between 20.4 and 20.5 is 20.45. These numbers form the bounds of the error interval, so it's 20.35 to 20.45. For this question, we need to use a calculator to work out this calculation. So let's take our calculator and type it in. We'll need to start by pressing the square root button. Then we're going to need to enter a fraction, so we'll press the fraction button. On the top, we have the number 9.8, and then we press the down arrow to get to the bottom, and on the bottom we have 4, subtract and then pi, which we get by pressing Shift and then 7. On some calculators, you'll need to press Shift and the number at the bottom in the middle. Then we press the right arrow to get out of this fraction and plus 2. Then we can press the equals button and we get this number here. The question says to write down all of the figures of your calculator display, so we'll write them all down. It's 3.6628528991. In the second part of the question, we need to round this number to two significant figures. So let's take the number. The 3 at the beginning is the first significant figure, and then the 6 will be the second one. So we'll draw a line after this 6. We then check the number after this, which is also a 6, which is 5 or more, so this tells us we need to round up. So the previous 6 will round up to a 7. So the answer is 3.7. In this question, we have Noah who invests £5,000 in a saving account for 4 years. We're told the account pays compound interest. After 1 year, his investment is worth £5,200, and we need to work out how much it would be worth after 4 years. So the investment starts at £5,000, and then 1 year later it's £5,200. So in this time, Noah has gained £200 of interest. We need to work out what percentage this £200 represents. We can do this by taking the £200, dividing it by the original amount, £5,000, and multiplying by 100. This will give you an answer of 4%. This means the interest rate for the compound interest is 4%. So we've got two ways of finishing this question. We can either start at 5,200 and add 4% 3 more times, or we can go back to the original 5,000 and add 4% 4 times. That's the one I'm going to do. We now need to work out a multiplier for an increase of 4%. To do this, we start with 100%, then add the 4%, which is obviously 104%, and then take this number and divide it by 100, which will give you 1.04. This means if we multiply his investment by 1.04, it will increase by 4%. So that's what we do. We need to do this 4 times though for the 4 years, so we do it to the power 4. If you type this into your calculator, you'll get this number here. Since this is money, we need to round it to 2 decimal places, so it'll be £5,849.29. In this question, we need to work out an estimate for the mean race times of the 8 athletes. Since this data is in groups, we need to work out the midpoint of each of them first. The first group goes from 125 to 130. The midpoint of this is 127.5. The next group from 130 to 135 has a midpoint of 132.5, and the midpoint for the last group is 137.5. We then multiply these midpoints by their frequencies. So 127.5 multiplied by 1 is just 127.5. 132.5 multiplied by 3 is 397.5. And 137.5 multiplied by 4 is 550. We then add up these numbers, which will give you a total of 1075, and then we need to divide this by the total frequency, which we can get by adding up this frequency column to get 8, which was also given to us in the question if you look closely. We then divide 1075 by 8, which will give you the answer, 134.375. In the second part of the question, we're told that one of the athletes ran the race with an average speed of 6.1 meters per second, and we need to decide if they won the race. To do this, we need to work out how long it took them to do the race, which is the time. We've been given the speed, and the distance is actually in the question too. It said 800 meters. So we can work out the time using the link between speed, distance, and time. Speed is equal to distance divided by time, which if you rearrange is time equals distance divided by speed. So to work out the time of this athlete, we do the distance, which was 800, divided by the speed, which is 6.1. If you do this on a calculator, you get this number here. Notice that this number is between 130 and 135, so they would be one of the runners in this middle interval here. At least one of the runners must have been quicker than this though, because there is one runner who ran a time between 125 and 130. So we can be sure that the runner that we're talking about did not win the race. We would write down an explanation, so something like no, since at least one athlete ran faster. In this question, we need to show the perpendicular height of the cone is 14 centimeters. If we write the height of the cone in the middle like this, and mark on another radius at 5.1 like this, you can see we form a right-angled triangle. This means we can use Pythagoras to find the value of h. For Pythagoras, we're going to square the two values we have, so 14.9 squared and 5.1 squared, and then we need to decide if we add or subtract these. Since h is not the hypotenuse, it's one of the two shorter sides, we would subtract them. If you do this on a calculator, you get 196. To find h, we would then square root 196, which gives you 14. In the second part of the question, we need to work out the volume of the cone. We've been given the formula for the volume of a cone, which is 1/3 pi r squared h. So we're just going to use this formula to work out the volume. So it's 1/3 multiplied by pi, then multiplied by r squared, so multiplied by 5.1 squared, and then multiplied by h, which we just found was 14. If you type this into your calculator, you get this number here. This question says to round it to one decimal place, so it'll be 381.3. Thank you for watching this video, I hope you found it useful. It would make a huge difference for me if you would subscribe to the channel and also consider liking, commenting, or sharing this video.